Hello everyone, Forest Focus. Pre-season is underway and the Premier League is a month from returning. Joining me to discuss the transfer business so far, the work still to do and the potential plan to solve that set-piece problem is BBC Radio Nottingham's Forest commentator, Colin Fray. Colin, how you doing?
Yeah, all right, thanks, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Good to have you back with us. We mentioned pre-season there. One of the questions that people asked us for a Q&A recently, last week, was a lot about how much stock people put in pre-season in terms of results, how much it matters. What's your view on pre-season? I bet you hate it work-wise because you'd love a longer summer. But do you put too much stock in it? How do you view it?
I don't take any notice of it whatsoever. I think it's one of the biggest myths in football is that pre-season results are important. I mean, I know to those in football, obviously to the coaches, to the player, obviously to the players, it's crucial. To the coaches, it's crucial in terms of trying stuff, in terms of seeing what works, partnerships, all the rest of it. There are so many. I mean, football couldn't exist without them. But when you watch them, you realise how kind of dull, for want of a better word, many of them are from a spectator's point of view. And I think it's fairly obvious, isn't it, that the results. I mean, I see people getting, not just Forest, but all over the country, getting so worked up about results in friendlies. Doesn't matter. You can lose 6 out of 6 pre-season and still have a good season. You can win 6 out of 6 pre-season and have a shocker. You can read absolutely nothing into results and even performances. I remember going to Burton for a couple of years in recent seasons, and they've had, they've been shocking games, been awful games, but they're like amongst the first friendlies of the summer. They probably are. I can't quite remember whether or not it was exactly the first friendly of the summer. And but it's kind of like, well, what do you expect? Do you expect a team to really hit the ground running and smash the other lot for 6 or 7? I think they're a necessity, obviously, for football. They have to have them. But I'm amazed by how many people put so much stock in it and so much faith in it. Those outside the squads and players. For me, yeah, they mean absolutely nothing.
I think I view them like England friendlies. I mean, I don't watch England friendlies anymore, but the result's a bit meaningless. All you want to see, for me, is players looking like they know what they're doing in terms of where they're meant to be on the pitch and kind of tactical plan. They look fit. They look like a group that's, following what the manager's telling them. But I agree about results. If you see some kind of cohesion and plan, then that's all fine. I couldn't tell you a result from any pre-season friendly going back more than last season.
No, it doesn't matter. And even shape and fitness and all that sort of thing. You wouldn't be expecting it at this stage of the summer. That you're going to see players that are up to absolute full fitness. You wouldn't want them because that means they're peaking a month too early. And in terms of systems, again, would you expect the system to be absolutely clear and working, or are you looking at a manager who's, working out exactly what his system is going to be by opening day of Premier League? So, it's very difficult to read anything, I think, into any pre-season friendly, even up to the first, the last weekend before the season starts, because you still don't know whether or not the coach is trying stuff, where the players are, playing in a slightly different role than they might be the following week. You're still not expecting to see the finished product. I think it's very difficult to judge, and maybe that's the word. It's very difficult to judge anything from any friendly. And certainly I don't, from my experience anyway, you don't turn up to a friendly ever expecting a really good game.
Are you bothered about who we play as well? That's the other thing people would complain about. Oh, we're playing Olympiacos again. I mean, they're a good side. I don't think it matters. As long as you play some decent opposition. You start, we're playing Chesterfield, all due respect. They're not Olympiacos. They're not Valencia, who we played. But, I don't want us to play Barcelona in the last game. I don't think that's relevant either.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. I think there's a few fans that are starting to look at what the other Premier League sides do.
What commercially you mean, with tours and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean commercially, tours, and obviously the big guns are there's a lot of teams this year that are going to America. There's some that are going the other direction. Some are going Far East. I think Newcastle, Spurs going to sort of Tokyo and South Korea. And obviously there's some lucrative cash, I would think, there. But even clubs like, your West Ham, Wolves, Crystal Palace, those kind of clubs, they're going to America as well and sort of playing each other. Not necessarily all of them playing against everybody else, but there's a lot of Premier League sides meeting each other in America during the course of the summer. I do wonder if that's something that going forward, as Forest become more established as a Premier League side, whether or not they might look to get involved with. Because I think you look at I have got a list actually at work, but I can't remember exactly. But you look at a Manchester City's preparation for the season, for instance, and they are playing potentially a Barcelona. Forgive me, I can't remember the names, but it's a fixture list that is something like Liverpool, Arsenal, Barcelona, Celtic, teams like that they're playing all the way through pre-season. And I do wonder whether or not that gives you slightly more of a preparation for the Premier League than a fixture list like a Forest have got this summer, for instance, and whether or not, that's something that Forest might look to get involved with, assuming they can stay in the Premier League for another season or two and start to get involved with that sort of potentially more lucrative, American tour side of things. Maybe it's all Premier League branding, isn't it? All that sort of stuff. So maybe in the future that might be something that Forest do. But then again, fans might prefer to have a game on their doorstep, a Chesterfield on their doorstep, a couple of home games before the season starts, decent opposition, whatever. Again, it's pre-season. It's all about how you're prepared and how your club thinks you'll be best prepared for what happens on August the 17th.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting commercially more as much as football. Like I know Brentford did it last season. I guess it's organised well in advance, and they probably go for clubs they think actually they're going to be in the Premier League next season. So if Forest are still there, and it also sounds like Colin Fray is going to be knocking on BBC Radio Nottingham's door and asking for a trip to Miami. Sounds quite appeling.
If they're out there for like 2 or 3 weeks, they need somebody covering what they're up to, don't they?
They do. Let's talk about the work done in transfer-wise so far then. I mean, as we sit here today, a couple of days recording this before it comes out, not expecting too much to be done, but Elliot Anderson is probably the headline signing, I guess, with Carlos Miguel and a couple of other interesting bits of business around younger players. Big sales of Mangala, Niakate, Vlachodimos as well, I count as a big sale in terms of the cash they got for him. It's a kind of a different approach from what we've seen in previous years in terms of perhaps the number of signings. Obviously, it's PSR influenced as well. I really like what they've done so far. What's your verdict on it?
Yeah, I sort of agree. I think so far so good. As far as the dealings are concerned, I think the money that they've got for those players that you mentioned is fabulous, and obviously looks like it's sort of bailed them out of any sort of PSR situation for the year that's just ended. So for the forthcoming season, it means they should be okay and free of a points deduction. So that's good. And I think the incoming business has been both interesting and it seems decent so far. I mean, Elliot Anderson obviously is the headline for the sort of money that they've shelled out for him. But, having talked to my colleague at BBC Radio Newcastle, it does seem as if Forest are getting a little bit of a gem in Elliot Anderson, a player who can play in a lot of positions, although his feeling was that maybe he needs to get a position and sort of nail that down rather than becoming a utility player, because it's kind of quite difficult, I guess, in the Premier League to be a utility player. But having said that, it's valuable for any squad if they can have players who are able to sort of play in multiple positions. But, hugely interesting to see his development. The guys in Newcastle talking about potentially if he has a good couple of years, then there's no reason why he can't go international. He can't become an England player. So I think it's an exciting one to watch that Forest have got there. And I think the same probably goes for Eric da Silva Moreira, 18-year-old, who's come out of German football. May not be immediately ready for the Premier League, but certainly I think he's going to be a player who, a bit like, I suppose, Rodrigo Ribeiro last year, who was 18, brought in on loan. Although he was only 18, he was, very much part of the first team squad and picture, rather than being sort of with the B team and the development side of things. And I think the same will go for Eric da Silva Moreira. I think they'll want him to be very much part of the first team squad. Whether or not he's first team kind of remains to be seen. And again, but I think it's an exciting kind of signing. It's an exciting one to watch for the future, to see exactly how he can adapt. And Carlos Miguel, big signing in every sense of the word, isn't he? I mean, it is, you look at some of the videos and see him towering over his teammates. It's just extraordinary. The thing is with him is that he doesn't, according to the records that I've seen, doesn't have an awful lot of first team football experience. So again, it's going to be interesting to see exactly where he fits in the pecking order of goalkeepers. Obviously, he's the second goalkeeper that Nuno, a goalkeeper, has brought in. Behind Matt Sells, but it'll be interesting to see whether or not Nuno sees one as a number one and one as a number two, or if they're both number ones and they're vying for it, and we'll see where we go. You would suggest that, given that Nuno's brought those two in, they would probably be ahead of Matt Turner in the pecking order. But again, I'd stick it in the category of an interesting signing and be very interested to see how he goes and how he develops and whether or not he can force his way in ahead of Matt Sells.
I think one of the things as well that we kind of get ahead of ourselves, I do anyway, is I look at these signings and think, yeah, that's really good. But we did finish 17th last season, and we haven't necessarily signed players who are going to walk into the 11. I mean, I think Anderson might find his way in and Miguel might find their way in, not necessarily at the start, but do we need to sign players who are actually going to improve the quality of the 11, nailed on guaranteed, as well as Murillo potentially going, which could leave a big hole in the side?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sale of Niakate leaves a gap at centre half anyway. Obviously, they've got the likes of Worrell and Omobamidele behind Murillo and Bolly at the moment, but I think that's probably an area where they'll look to bring somebody else in. Obviously, a lot of talk about Jake O'Brien at Lyon. But I think that'll be an area of some priority. And I think they're a little bit short in the fullback positions as well, still defensively. I think that's an area where they'll probably look to improve. And yes, I think they will look to add quality. I think that we're still, the unusual thing really is that we're this early in the summer and talking about Forest having done quite a lot of business. We know what Forest transfer windows are like. Most of the business is done in the couple of hours around 11 o'clock on deadline day. Who's to say what's going to happen this deadline day? But there does seem a strategy this year. There seems a real sort of everybody sort of seems at the moment to be on the same page, really. That they are building in a certain way to go forward. But I do think they will look to add quality. I still think they are short in their squad. I'm sure we'll see more outgoings as well, even though there've been a lot since the end of last season already. I think there'll be more. Yes, Nuno wants a smaller squad, but he doesn't want a squad that's so small that he's left with real issues. Going back to centre half, as you say, if Murillo ends up going and Niakate is already gone, then you're taking a couple of real mainstays out of last season's first choice centre halves, along with Bolly, of course, who's still there. And then you're looking at the backup in Omobamidele and Worrell at the moment. So I think would leave them too short. And so although he wants a smaller squad, he doesn't want a squad that ends up being so short that he's ending up with no options. So yeah, I think we'll still see signings. I think we'll probably see plenty. I think we'll see some outgoings as well. And I certainly think there are areas in the squad where they're a little bit light at the moment and would love to add some bulk and some strength and some quality.
Do you think as well, you mentioned Nuno liking a smaller squad. I mean, I was looking at kind of a depth chart, and I think we've only got 18 senior players, and then you kind of tag Moreira on the end. You mentioned Worrell and Omobamidele, so Joe might go. But do you think we'll see a squad of 21, 20, probably 22 like he had at Wolves, and it being more feeling like Nuno's team more now he's got a whole pre-season as well?
Yeah, I guess so. I suppose, what I talked about the goalkeepers is probably an indication of that. That, he's not been at the club too long, but he has had 2 transfer windows. Well, he's in his second transfer window, and within, the first few weeks of that second transfer window, he's already brought in his second goalkeeper. So I think you are starting to see him stamp his mark on the squad. And I think it will look by the end of this window more like the squad that Nuno wants, more balanced. He's talked about balance, hasn't he? Yes, numbers is one thing, but balance is another. And I think he thought the squad was pretty unbalanced when he came in. So he'll be trying to address that. Whether or not he'll go for that same number, I don't know. I thought it was interesting that, because I sort of looked at the squad as well and started to sort of piece it together a little bit. And what you do notice is that the Omobamideles, the Murillos, the players who were under 21s last season are no longer under 21s. So they're going to take places on the squad. And obviously Moreira won't, because he is well under 21. So what I'm saying is, last season you were able to have your 25 and then those other players. This season, those other players become part of your 25 by definition. So I think, I suppose what I'm saying is, I don't suppose he'd want more than the 25. I think that's what you're saying. I don't think he'd want to be in a position where he's leaving senior players out of a 25-man squad. And given that 25-man squad is going to have a few more who weren't in it last year being promoted into it, if you like, by age, assuming they stay, assuming Murillo stays, of course, then that is going to, limit's the wrong word, it's going to take up space on that 25-man squad list. I don't think he'll want senior players hanging around not in his squad.
No, I agree. This whole Steve Cook thing springs to mind, and that was a bit of a nightmare for the player and the way it ended up as well, and by Brian and stuff like that. Yeah, it feels more calm and less chaotic, which I'm all for. Just before we talk about a couple of other topics, a quick word for our sponsors, the Trent Navigation. Do indulge us for 30 seconds, if you don't mind, Cole, for a quick video from Matt Ford.
And not just great beers, but immaculate inside. Cobs on the bar. What more do you want? I would say it was well priced as well. And then, obviously, as you know, the big shed outside and what they've done on match days is phenomenal. That's become, when I first started going, as a kid, I never really heard of the Trent Nav as like a big place to go. And then the last few years, it's really grown in stature as a pre-match place to go. I love it. And I love the fact that it's on the way to the ground. And I just love everything they've done with it. It's great.
Cobs on the bar. What more do you want? What more do you want? Here's a hard-hitting journalistic question. What's your sandwich of choice, Cole? The question you never thought you'd be asked.
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends the time of day you're talking about, but a bacon cob, is definitely the choice. And if it's lunchtime, probably add some chicken to it. So chicken and bacon.
Now, you've stumbled into a debate from a recent podcast. If you have it, it was a sausage sandwich, but if a bacon sandwich, are you putting in sauce on that? And what sauce, if so?
No, never any sauce. Never sauce. Thing is, if you put sauce on a bacon cob, it takes away from the taste of the bacon.
Nice. Butter?
If it's on the bar, you probably haven't got a choice. But if I had a choice, no.
Oh,
very plain, me. Very plain.
Nice. Well, if it's good bacon, it's fine. If it's quality bacon, yeah, I'm going with butter as well.
And if I'm adding my chicken in at lunchtime, a little bit of mayo.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I put mayonnaise on chips, which will disgust people. So, yeah. Right, let's get back to some football talk before we have to let Colin go. One of the players you mentioned there was O'Brien at Lyon. We've seen Carlos Miguel's massive. O'Brien's 6'6", I think. They're also linked with I've forgotten his name. Yeah, Jakub Biel, the Slovenia defender, who I saw is 6 foot something and a beast. And then there's a lot who's 6'5". If there's a theme developing, these players don't necessarily come around how they're going to toughen up at the back. It's quite rudimentary, but it sounds sensible. What do you make of it if we do just go big and tough to solve our back issues around defending set pieces?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say, really, is set pieces, was an obvious Achilles heel for Forest last season. And they'd have had so many more points if they had been able to defend set pieces on anywhere near a regular basis. They conceded far less goals and therefore got more results in more games. I mean, I go back to West Ham away just as one example. There are so many examples, but West Ham away was a shocker, having been 2-1 up, and played okay, and then just thrown it away. So many examples, and yes, size is one thing. In let's just talk about the goalkeeper because he's a Forest player already. Size is one thing, but you need to be able to use that size. So you'd want to see Carlos Miguel coming out and commanding that penalty area, commanding that 6-yard box, and taking some responsibility for knocking players out of the way, coming in and either punching the ball away or catching it or whatever it may be. I do think that when Willy Bolly was fit last year and was in the side, he made a big difference. And that's no disrespect to the other players around. But I think Bolly was very, very useful for Forest defensively because he uses his height. He uses his height and he uses his strength. And I think they looked a better unit when he was in the side rather than when he wasn't. Now, that's not to say they were completely infallible. They weren't infallible when he was playing. It's not to say that when he played, they kept clean sheets. They were nowhere near that either, which is an indication, I suppose, of how much they do need to improve defensively in terms of the manner of the goals they concede. But my point was that as long as you're able to use your height and you can be dominating inside your own penalty area, then yes, height is a great thing. But there's no point in having a 6'6" defender who struggles to get off the ground and gets bullied and knocked off the ball. So big and strong is one thing, but they have to have that talent as well. Now, I'm pretty sure, obviously, that the players that Forest are being linked with, especially if the money that we're starting to see being talked about for Jake O'Brien, they'll be sure that he'll be able to do a job. And, I would have no problem with having, big, strong, head it, kick it, central defenders in the penalty area, if that's indeed what they're going to do and help Forest defend those set pieces a lot better than they were able to last season.
Do you think, when you mentioned head it, kick it, centre halves, like one of the things the ex-pros on here often say, and they're not ex-pros who were playing 40 years ago, like Gary, who obviously did tremendous things for the club, but like Lewis and Kelvin and Nathan Tyson said it as well, around the game just being overly complicated, players overcoached, too much tactics, not enough freedom. And the kind of a head it, kick it, rugged centre half kind of throws us back to the football that we were growing up. Does that tally with what you see in the Premier League now? And when you're talking with Steve Hodge and Brian Dawes, do they have that view or not?
I think it's. I think there is some of that. Yeah, for sure. I think, I should clarify. I think to play in the Premier League these days, you need to be a bit more than a head it, kick it, centre half.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, of course.
But to have those attributes as two of your attributes would be a good thing. But I suppose it's a good case in point for the kind of thing that those guys have been talking about, because yes, you can be a head it, kick it, centre half, but you also need to be a ball player, because so many teams now play out from the back. So you've got to be comfortable with the ball at your feet. You've got to be able to pass it around, and you've got to want it in a tight area and be confident with it in a tight area, so that you can quickly lay it off to somebody else who's in a bit more space as you're getting closed down. All those kind of things are in today's football, whereas before, you go back a few years and they weren't, because you could be, even at the top level, you could be a head it and kick it centre half, and that's potentially all you need. I think that is a demonstration, really, of, some would say, how far the game's come, how much the game's changed, but also, I suppose it sort of falls some way into that category of maybe it being overcoached, hybrid fullbacks and false nines and all that sort of stuff, which is, very much part of our footballing vocabulary these days, but was unheard of. I think there's a lot to be said for what coaches like Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola have done for Premier League football, for the English game. I mean, you look at the way Jurgen Klopp set his Liverpool side up, and that high press was something that we've rarely seen before, if at all. It was a new thing, and I do think there's a bit of a sense that maybe coaches are looking for the next new thing in football. Let's this has been football over the years, but let's try this. Let's just see if this works. I suppose your hybrid fullback is the latest thing. That's sort of come in over the last couple of years, hasn't it? Just to give other teams something else to think about. I mean, where these ideas originally come from, it's, who knows? You just have a thought one night at 3 o'clock in the morning. I know what I'll do. I'll bring my fullback in there when we've got the ball, and that'll really confuse them because there's an extra midfielder. I know what the guys mean when they talk about sometimes it feels a little bit overcoached, and you mentioned the term there, sort of lack of freedom, not enough freedom, sort of taking the shackles off a little bit.
I think that's the big one. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I think we've seen a bit of it in the summer with England. It's just a bit, it's frustrating. It's like, let them play, let them go. Certainly in the early stage of the tournament, and I think sometimes there's a little bit of that, but you can't look at a Manchester City, or, as I say, Klopp's Liverpool, or Arsenal under Arteta. Yes, they're very, very, very well coached, and they have a style and they have a system, but I don't think you can look at those teams at the top of the Premier League and be critical that they're so overcoached that the shackles are off. Do you know what I mean? I think maybe you can look at that if some teams are trying to emulate what those top teams are doing and not quite getting it right, then maybe it looks that way. But I think, it would be very harsh to look at those really top teams and think anything other than, wow, they're a joy. They're brilliantly coached, and they're just fantastic to watch, because by and large they are. And so I wonder if that sort of overcoaching is perhaps a little bit lower down the standard, where you'll perhaps see teams potentially trying to play out the back, but actually they haven't got the players to do it, and so they get caught in possession and they concede possession, and then they lose goals, and then you go, well, just head it and kick it. That's when that comes into it, I think. So it's not necessarily the teams right at the top who do it really well. It's perhaps the teams a little bit lower down, both the league and the pyramid, who are trying to emulate it, but actually haven't quite got the players who are able to do it, which I guess comes back to, if you are a coach to the players you've got rather than necessarily what, that picture of utopia you've got, coaching utopia. This is what I really want it to look like. You haven't got the players to do it. Don't do it that way. Play to the player's strength.
Yeah, I think you're right. I suppose Dave Bassett's a Forest example of that, with what he did at Wimbledon and how he coached Forest. And with Guardiola as well. I guess Guardiola's the one you always look at. I think there's probably a trade-off you have to make with brilliant innovator, as you say. I think he was the first one to invert a fullback with Kyle Walker or someone like that, or Rico Lewis, and everyone copied him. And then the trade is probably, Aston Villa's Jack Grealish is different to Man City's Jack Grealish, but it's super effective because it creates space on the other side of the pitch, and he's always thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead. And it can appear robotic, but actually it's genius, really.
And when you've got players of that quality, Matt, they're able to take those instructions on.
Yeah,
they can adapt.
Well, they don't play.
A Kyle Walker can suddenly, you want me to what? But he, that will be his first reaction. But I can do that. I'm good enough to do that. Whereas lower down, when you start to copy, you're starting to coach players who are not comfortable in that position. So don't do it. Play to the player's strengths.
Because this is a kind of a pared down week and there's only a couple of shows, I'm going to probably annoy people and cram in another couple of adverts to people who support us. So our second sponsor of this episode is... Oh, where's the thing gone? There it is. This is so slick, this operation, Colin, for you come to appreciate it. Home Move Estate Agents, as people know, have backed us for ages. Thanks very much to Ben Sales. You can see the contact on the screen. But if you Google Home Move Estate Agents Nottingham or Home Move Estate Agents Ben Sales, you will find them on Google, where they are 5-star rated. They are, of course, the best place to buy and sell your home if you're looking to move in the Nottingham area. Right, there you go. This is as close as you'll get to commercial radio, Colin.
Not used to this.
There's one more to come in the next 10 minutes or so before we go. Right, looking at Forest a little bit more going into the new season as well. Just who are you looking at that you're really keen to see? Because there's younger players who did well last season that are probably going to kick on, hopefully, touch wood, like Gibbs White, Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, Murillo. Is hopefully going to have a really big season if he does stay. If you were looking at a couple of players that you're really excited about next season, who would they be?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of those that you mentioned. I just think, I'd love to think that Forest fans and myself, to talk selfishly, are going to get another season or half a season or whatever it may be of Murillo, because I just think, he's not infallible. He's a young defender still, and therefore, Forest with him at the back don't keep as many clean sheets as I'm sure he would want. But I'd love to see him continue to develop, and he's just a joy. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, so many times Forest were in trouble. He'd just stick on the afterburners and get into the right position and make a block or a tackle or clear it off the line or whatever it may be. He's a joy to watch as a defender. And with all due respect to the profession, there's not many defenders that kind of make you think that make you excited that he's in the team. Oh, great! I get to see Murillo again. I get to see that centre half again. That's a real that was a real highlight for me of last season. And hopefully Forest can keep him. Who knows what sort of bids they're going to get as the deadline approaches. But those attacking players, I mean, I'd throw in the name of Elliot Anderson. I am interested and intrigued to see how he's going to go, especially given the kind of glowing reference he comes down from the northeast with. So I'm very excited to see him, interested to see him. And yeah, Morgan Gibbs White is going to be an interesting season for him. Callum Hudson-Odoi towards the end of last season, I think we were starting to see the best of him. I think he was flourishing, and I hope he can have a sort of a full season like that, because I think he did take a little bit of getting going at the start of last season, but certainly by the end we were seeing the best of it. From Elanga's point of view, possibly the other way round. started really well and then maybe faded out. So, but having had now, I remember talking to him towards the end of last season actually, and he was saying how much of a better player he felt he was, having had a full season of Premier League football. He's been a Premier League player before with Manchester United, but not really able to get into the side. And he agreed that he would consider it really his first full season as a Premier League player, and felt he was the better for it. So I think an interesting season coming up for him. You'd like to see Taiwo Awoniyi steer clear of injury. Because if he can, I think he can be a real threat. I do wonder whether or not, just to go back to what Forest might do, I wonder whether or not they will look to add another striker. Chris Wood obviously had a fantastic season in terms of goals last year, and boy, how Forest needed him, but he responded to the challenge. But I do wonder if, in addition to Wood and Awoniyi, they might look to try and strengthen again, albeit, as we know from previous windows, that's a very difficult position to try and strengthen. But I think if Awoniyi can have an injury-free season, I think he can be a real threat. And there was a time, didn't happen very often because of Taiwo Awoniyi's injuries, really. But when he was at full pace, and Elanga was at full pace, and Hudson-Odoi is at full pace, and Gibbs-White is at full pace, and the four of them break, then that's threatening. That's a real threat to any defence, and it's thrilling to watch. And as I say, we didn't get to see it too often last year, but when it happened and when it clicked, even in, go back right to the first game of last season, that break against Arsenal, and I know they lost the game, they were 2-0 down by the time it happened, but the thrilling break with the pace that they went at Arsenal and then produced the final ball and the finish as well. That was great to watch, and I'm hoping to see more of that next season as Forest hopefully become a more established Premier League side and have the ball maybe a little bit more and can do more with it. And I think we started to see that in the second half of last season with Nuno, and so yeah, I think there's a lot to sort of look forward to, really. Obviously, we have no idea yet what the team is going to look like on opening day, because who knows how many signings that they're going to make between now and then. And then, of course, what it's going to look like at the start of September when the window is finally closed. But I do think there's some exciting things to look forward to. Now they're back in the Premier League again. Now once they'd got themselves re-established in the Premier League last season and made sure they were going to stay up despite the points deduction, I immediately started to think, well, maybe next year is going to be the year where they can get some distance between themselves and the relegation zone and start to really enjoy themselves as a Premier League club, and Forest fans really start to, who knows, maybe even relax for the first time as Premier League fans, because for 2 years it's been really tense and it's been thoroughly enjoyable. But my word, it's been hard work. It was draining at times last season. I'm not talking about my work. I'm talking about as a fan. It was just draining to watch what was going on and all the off the field stuff and the VAR stuff and all the rest of it. It was draining. And obviously tense because of the proximity to the relegation zone the whole time. Can just get that little bit further clear. And those players that we've talked about can develop, and Forest can develop that style that, as I say, I think we started to see under Nuno last year. Then I think it can be exciting as we go forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm looking forward to it. I think there's hopefully some exciting times ahead if we do some couple of good bits of business. And while you were talking there, I was thinking of answers myself, and though I came up with two names, Taiwo was definitely one, because he's not really there's not many other strikers like him in the Premier League. There's a couple of goals he scored, and I can't remember the first one. It might have been West Ham at home or something where he shrugged off a defender, but the one that definitely springs to mind is Arsenal at home. And it's kind of a forgotten goal because we'd lost the game pretty comfortably, but he shrugged off Saliba, and no one else does that. And I think,
you can't do that very often,
No. But if we see that Taiwo able to do that, it's massive.
Yeah. And the other one I remember is, again, it's a game that Forest lost, but he bullied Konate
Yeah.
Ibrahim Konate for Liverpool. And I think it was the game that Forest lost. I think the one I'm thinking of is at Anfield, and he really gave him a bit of a working over. In the way, and you're right with the Saliba thing as well, in the way that you don't see those kind of defenders troubled very often. But he had the physical capability. I've just talked about his pace, when he's at full pace, but he's got the physical attributes to do it as well.
Yeah, and Sangare was the other one I was thinking of. Not because he's a particularly thrilling player, with all due respect to him, but if he fires, then I think we might fire as well. So, yeah, he'd be the other one. Last topic as well, I just wanted to get Cole's take on before we finish, is the City Ground issue. There'll be some developments on it this week, I hope. But what's your view on how it is? It felt like it was resolved. Now it feels like it's not quite resolved. Is it going to rumble on for years, realistically, before it's all done and dusted?
Well, I mean, whether or not an actual sale of the City Ground will run on for years and years, I would doubt. But I think it's going to be a lot of years before we see the City Ground developed in the way that it now seems as if Forest want. I think there's a lot of red tape that needs to be cut through. Do you cut through red? Yes, you cut through red tape, don't you? That needs to be cut through before that deal goes ahead. Certainly, it seemed as if the council were more convinced it was happening than Forest last week, shall we say? But I don't think that that's necessarily means it's not going to happen. I think it's just Forest potentially being a little bit more cautious about some of the bits of red tape that they still have to go through and cut through. And as Forest statement said, that they want certain assurities that it's one thing owning the land, but they need assurities that they are going to be able to develop the land in the way they want to develop the land to get the City Ground as they want it. So I think it's just about those assurances, really, but obviously that's going to take a bit of working through. I think probably they will do what has been talked about last week and what the fans made very clear towards the end of last season. I think they'll stay at the City Ground. I think it will be redeveloped eventually. But as we've seen with the Peter Taylor stand, it's going to take some time. And I think it will probably be still a few more years before we see the City Ground anywhere near where Mr. Marinakis wants it to look like. But I think we're certainly taking positive steps in the right direction towards staying at the City Ground.
I think so. Hopefully so. Right. Thanks for everyone's patience today with the ads. Don't normally do 3 in a show, but finally, Heavy Metal Football, good sponsors of the show. I've launched the pre-order for the restock of the 93-95 away inspired t-shirt. Pre-orders are open until midnight on July the 21st, so make sure you guarantee your shirt by ordering one ASAP. And in the second graphic, you will see they've also got a range of other alternative Forest-inspired shirts available at their website, heavymetalfootball.co.uk. If you use the discount code Forest Focus, all one word, then you can get 20% off on that as well. Right. Just before we let you go, Cole, tell people how they can find you, obviously on Radio Nottingham, but in terms of podcasts as well.
Yeah, BBC Radio Nottingham, weekly show, a nightly show, 6 till 7, called In the Game. And our Forest podcast is called Shut Up and Show More Football, which you can get with myself and David Jackson and various guests from time to time as well. And you can find it in all your usual podcast places. Thank you for the plug.
No problem. Plugging my own. The only other show this week probably is with Kieran Maguire, just on the state of football finance, some of it on Forest obviously, but just in general, and how we think it's going to evolve in the next few years around the Premier League, the football regulator, how Forest will be hit by the new rules when they come in after we'd finally got our head around PSR and spreadsheets and amortization. I think Colin's probably spent more time than me on that, but my C in GCSE maths that was scraped was put stretched to the limit, shall we say, in the last few months. Right. Thank you very much to everyone who has listened. Do us a favor, do hit like and subscribe. A big help if you would, and give us a lovely review on iTunes. Colin, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Matt. All the best. See you soon.
Yeah, we shall see you soon. Have a good day, everyone. And like Colin says, we shall see you soon.